The massive alien ship hung in space like a dark mountain against the stars. Inside its crystal walls, Ambassador Zexthara stared at the blue and green planet spinning slowly below. Earth looked so small and peaceful from here. The alien's 4 arms moved across the control panel, while his insect-like eyes studied the data streaming across holographic displays. Such a young species, Zexthara whispered to himself. His voice made a clicking sound that echoed through the empty command chamber. They only learned to fly between their own planets 50 years ago. They still fight wars with each other over resources and land. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. 3 other council members entered the room. General Corvin from the warrior race known as the Korth walked on 6 legs, his gray skin covered in thick armor plates. Behind him came Ethereal Sage, Moon Whisper, floating in a bubble of glowing energy. The 3rd alien looked almost human, except for her silver skin and completely black eyes. "The debate is finished," General Corvin announced. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "The Council of 12 has made their decision about the humans." Zexthara turned away from the planet display. "And what have they decided?" "Standard. Tributary terms," the silver-skinned alien replied. Her name was Valandra, and she spoke for the Trade Federation. 10% of their population for the work farms. 50% of their natural resources. Complete technology transfer. They have 72 hours to agree. "What if they refuse?" Zexthara asked, though he already knew the answer. General Corvin's eyes glowed red. "No species has ever refused. In 10,000 years. But if these humans are stupid enough to try, we will glass their planet and take what we want from the ashes." Down on Earth, President Jake Morrison sat in the White House Situation Room, staring at a translation of the alien message. The words on the screen seemed impossible to believe, but the 1,200 alien ships surrounding his planet made it very real. "Tell me again what they want," Jake said to the room full of his advisors. General Lisa Carter, head of the newly formed Space Defense Command, read from her tablet. 10% of our population to work as slaves on their worlds. Half of all our oil, metals, and other resources shipped to them every year. They want us to give them all our technology and weapons. In return, they say they will let us live as part of their Galactic Council. "As slaves, you mean?" said Director Sam Rodriguez from the Department of Alien Affairs. "Tributary species is what they call it," General Carter replied. "But yes, slaves." Jake looked around the room at the faces of his advisors. Some looked scared, others looked angry. All of them waited for him to make a decision that would affect every person on Earth. "What are our military options?" Jake asked. General Carter shook her head. "Mr. President, they have 1,200 ships. We have maybe 50 spacecraft that could be called military vessels, and most of those are just armed satellites. Their smallest ship is bigger than our largest aircraft carrier. Their weapons can destroy entire cities from orbit. So we can't fight them? Sir, it would be like a caveman with a stick trying to fight a modern army. The technology gap is just too big." Sam Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "Mr. President, maybe we should consider negotiating. Perhaps we can get better terms. Maybe they would accept 5% of our population instead of 10. Maybe we could give them resources over a longer time period." "You want to negotiate. How many of our people become slaves?" Jake asked. "I want to keep our species alive," Sam replied. "If we fight, they will kill everyone. If we negotiate, most of us live." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see people on the White House lawn. Tourists taking pictures, children playing, people just living their normal lives. None of them knew that alien ships filled the sky above the clouds, waiting to destroy everything they had ever known. "Have you told anyone else about this yet?" Jake asked. "No, sir," General Carter said. "We wanted to brief you first. But we can't keep this secret much longer. People are already asking questions about the strange lights in the sky." Jake turned back to face his advisors. "How long do we have to decide?" 72 hours from when we received the message. That gives us about 68 hours now. In his pocket, Jake's phone buzzed with a text message from his daughter Katie. She was at college, probably studying for exams, completely unaware that aliens wanted to take her and millions of other young people to work as slaves on distant worlds. "Mr. President?" General Carter prompted. "What are your orders?" Jake looked at each person in the room. These were smart people, good people who had devoted their lives to serving their country. They were scared, and they had every right to be scared. But Jake thought about his daughter, about all the daughters and sons and mothers and fathers across America and around the world. "I need to think," Jake said. "Give me 6 hours. Then we'll make the announcement to the world and give our answer to the aliens." "Sir, what announcement?" Sam asked. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "We're going to tell everyone the truth. That aliens came to Earth and demanded we become their slaves. And then we're going to tell them what America's answer is." "What answer is that, Mr. President?" Jake looked out the window again at the people living their lives in freedom. "The same answer Americans have always given to tyrants and bullies. The same answer we gave to King George, to Hitler, to every enemy who thought they could make us bow down." He turned back to his advisors. "We're going to tell them no." The room fell silent. Outside, a child laughed as he chased a butterfly. Across the White House lawn, unaware that the fate of humanity hung in the balance just a few floors above his head, President Jake Morrison stood behind the podium in the United Nations General Assembly Hall. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the audience, their faces showing fear, anger, and uncertainty. Television cameras from around the world pointed at him, ready to broadcast his words to billions of people. Jake looked down at his notes, then pushed them aside. This was not a time for prepared speeches. This was a time for truth. "My fellow human beings," Jake began, his voice steady and clear. 3 days ago, we learned that we are not alone in the universe. Ships from something called the Galactic Council now surround our planet. They have made us an offer." He paused, looking directly into the main camera. "They want 10% of our people to work as slaves on their worlds. They want half of everything we own. They want us to give up our weapons and our freedom. In return, they promise not to destroy our planet." Murmurs filled the assembly hall. Some delegates looked shocked. Others nodded grimly. They had all been briefed, but hearing it said out loud made it feel more real. "I have spent the last 3 days talking with leaders from every nation. We have discussed our options. We have looked at their ships and their weapons. We know what they can do to us." Jake's voice grew stronger. "But we also know who we are." High above Earth, aboard the Galactic Council flagship, Ambassador Zexthara watched the human broadcast with growing confusion. Around him, other council members stared at the screens showing the small human leader. "What is he doing?" asked Velandra, her silver skin reflecting the light from the displays. "Why is he talking to all of them at once? Does he not understand that only leaders negotiate with the council?" General Corvin's armored plates clicked together as he shifted his massive body. Primitive species often make these emotional displays before they surrender. It helps them accept their new place in the galaxy. But ethereal Sage Moonwhisper floated closer to the screen, her energy bubble pulsing with uncertain colors. "Something feels different about this one." I sense no submission in his thoughts. Back in the UN Assembly, Jake continued his speech. "The Council believes we will surrender, because that is what every other species has done for 10,000 years. They think we will choose to live as slaves rather than die as free people. He gripped the sides of the podium. They are wrong. The hall erupted in noise. Some delegates cheered. Others shouted in different languages. The Chinese representatives stood up and yelled something that the translators could not make out over. The Din Jake raised his hand for silence. I know some of you think this is madness. I know our weapons are primitive compared to theirs. I know they can destroy our cities from space. But I also know something they do not understand about humanity. In a small farm town in Kansas, Pete Williams watched the president's speech on his old television while cleaning his grandfather's hunting rifle. His wife Mary sat beside him, holding their baby daughter close. What does he know that they don't? Mary whispered. Pete worked the bolt action on the rifle, checking that it moved smoothly. That Americans don't know how to quit, he said quietly. Across the country, similar scenes played out in millions of homes. In Texas, rancher Bill Murphy called his neighbors to organize a meeting. In Alaska, fisherman Joe Clark started loading supplies into his boat. In Detroit, factory worker Amy Thompson signed up for the emergency militia training that had been announced on the radio. Jake's voice echoed through the UN hall and across the world. What they do not understand is that humans have something no other species in their council possesses. We have a word that they cannot translate into their languages because the concept does not exist for them. He paused, looking around the room. That word is freedom. We choose freedom over safety. We choose danger over slavery. We choose to fight against impossible odds rather than kneel before tyrants. Jake's voice rose with each word. We have done this before. When kings tried to tax us without representation, we said no. When dictators tried to conquer the world, we said no. When anyone, anywhere, has tried to take away the rights that our Creator gave us, we have always said no. On the alien flagship, the council members watched in growing alarm as translation programs struggled to make sense of what the human was saying. Freedom? Ixtara clicked his mandibles together in confusion. What does this word mean? The translation systems cannot find an equivalent, Valandra reported. The closest match is a concept that means dangerous chaos without proper authority. General Corvin's red eyes blazed brighter. This is why primitive species must be controlled. They speak nonsense and make irrational decisions. But Sage Moon Whisper's energy bubble was now pulsing deep red, the color of alarm. Wait, I am detecting something else in their communication. Networks. Multiple transmission sources across their planet. They are all broadcasting the same message. Jake reached the end of his speech. He looked directly into the camera, knowing that his words were being heard not just on Earth, but throughout the galaxy. So to the Galactic Council, I say this on behalf of every man, woman, and child on Earth. We have considered your offer carefully. We understand the consequences of our decision. Our answer is simple and final. He paused, letting the silence stretch across the world. No, we will not surrender our people. We will not surrender our freedom. We will not surrender our world. If you want what is ours, you will have to take it. And we promise you this. It will cost you more than you ever imagined. The UN assembly exploded in cheers and applause that could be heard through the building's thick walls. But Jake was not finished. And to every species in the galaxy that lives under council rule, know this: resistance is possible. Freedom is possible. Today, humanity chooses to fight. Tomorrow, you can make the same choice. The broadcast ended, but the message had been sent. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been enslaved for centuries, beings who had never heard the word freedom began to understand what it meant. And in the darkness of space around Earth, 1,200 alien ships prepared for a war unlike any they had ever fought. The humans had said no. Now they would learn what that really meant. The alien ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like burning meteors. General Corvin had chosen the Australian outback for the first landing, believing the empty desert would give his forces time to establish a base without interference. The massive transport vessels touched down on the red sand, their hulls still glowing from the heat of entry. 3,000 Korth warriors marched down the landing ramps, their 6 legs moving in perfect unison. Each soldier stood 8 feet tall and wore armor that could stop bullets. Their weapons fired energy beams that could melt steel. They had conquered 47 worlds using the same tactics. General Corvin surveyed the barren landscape through his helmet's sensors. Perfect, he rumbled to his officers. No cities, no military bases, no resistance. We will build our command center here, and then move on the population centers. What the aliens did not know was that the Australian outback was not empty. Bill Murphy had been born on his family's cattle ranch 60 years ago. He had never left the desert, never wanted to leave. This harsh land had shaped him into something as tough as the rocks and as stubborn as the scrub brush. That somehow found water in the endless dry heat. When the alien ships appeared on the horizon, Bill was ready. He had spent 3 days preparing. With his neighbors, turning their homeland into a trap. Every waterhole had been poisoned or mined. Every road had been blocked or rigged with explosives. Every hill and rock formation now hid armed men and women who knew the land better than their own heartbeats. The first alien patrol moved out from their landing zone at dawn. 20 soldiers marched in formation across the sand, their sensors, scanning for threats. They found nothing unusual until the ground exploded beneath their feet. Bill had buried 50 pounds of mining explosives under the path, triggered by a simple pressure plate. The blast sent 6 aliens flying through the air, their armor cracked and useless. The survivors tried to call for help, but their communications were being jammed by equipment that Pete Williams had built from spare television parts. From a ridge 400 yards away, Bill Murphy lined up his shot through the scope of his grandfather's hunting rifle. The weapon was over 100 years old, but it still put bullets exactly where he aimed them. The first alien went down with a hole through his helmet. The second fell when Rancher Tom Jenkins fired from another hill. The remaining aliens ran for cover, but there was no cover in the open desert. 12 humans with hunting rifles picked them off one by one, just like shooting wild pigs that threatened their cattle dot in space above Earth. Commander Rick Patterson watched the alien fleet through the bridge windows of his converted cargo ship. The vessel had been called Lucky Strike when it hauled grain between planets. Now it was the flagship of Earth's hastily assembled defense force, renamed Defiance. Rick had been a cargo pilot for 20 years. He was not a military officer, had never commanded a warship, but he understood something about space combat that the aliens did not expect. Sometimes the craziest plan was the best plan. All ships, this is Defiance, Rick spoke into his radio. Remember, they expect us to fight like gentlemen. They expect formation flying and honor codes and fair play. We're going to disappoint them. The Earth fleet consisted of 43 ships. Most were converted cargo haulers like Defiance. A few were mining vessels with powerful drilling lasers. 3 were passenger liners that had been turned into missile platforms. None of them should have stood a chance against the alien dreadnoughts. Rick's plan was simple and insane. Instead of fighting ship to ship, the Earth vessels would swarm the aliens like angry wasps. They would ram, self-destruct, and use every dirty trick that humans had learned in centuries of warfare. Target the big one in the center, Rick ordered. All ships maximum speed. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to hurt them so bad they think twice about coming back. The Defiance accelerated toward the alien flagship, followed by the rest of the Earth fleet. The aliens opened fire with their energy weapons. destroying 3 human ships in a first volley. But the remaining vessels kept coming, weaving and dodging like fighters. Instead of capital ships, Rick's ship slammed into the side of the alien dreadnought at full speed. The impact tore both vessels apart, but not before Rick's crew fired every missile they had into the alien ship's engine room. The explosion lit up space like a new star. Back on Earth, in the ruins of a shopping mall in suburban Phoenix, Sergeant Joe Mitchell prepared for the alien ground assault. Joe had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before the aliens arrived. He knew how to fight enemies with better weapons and superior numbers. The mall had been evacuated, but Joe had stayed behind, with enough explosives to level a city block. He had turned every store into a death trap, every corridor into a killing field. When the aliens came looking for human prisoners, they would find something they had never encountered before, a human who refused to give up. The first alien squad entered through the main entrance, their heavy footsteps echoing through the empty space. Joe watched them through security cameras he had rigged to run on car batteries. 12 soldiers, moving in tight formation, checking every corner with military precision. Joe waited until they reached the center of the mall, then triggered the first explosion. The sporting goods store erupted in flames, sending alien soldiers diving for cover behind overturned benches and decorative plants. "Welcome to Earth," Joe whispered to himself, then began picking them off with his sniper rifle from his hidden position in the old radio shack. For the next 6 hours, Joe played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the aliens. He would fire a few shots, then disappear through maintenance tunnels and air ducts that were too small for the large aliens to follow. Every time they thought they had him cornered, another explosion would rock the building. By sunset, 11 of the 12 aliens were dead, and Joe was still fighting. The reports came in from around the world. In Russia, farmers were using their tractors as tanks, ramming alien vehicles. In Japan, civilians were building improvised bombs from household chemicals. In Africa, entire villages were disappearing into the jungle, then reappearing to attack. Alien supply lines. Humanity was not fighting like any species the Galactic Council had ever encountered. They were not following the rules of civilized warfare. They were fighting like their lives depended on it, because they did. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council was losing. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On the distant world of Zephyr Prime, a blue-skinned humanoid named Kala huddled around an illegal radio receiver in her basement. For 200 years, her people had lived under council rule, working in the crystal mines and sending their children to serve alien masters. "Did you hear that correctly?" whispered her neighbor Jorik, his scaled hands shaking as he adjusted the radio's frequency. "The humans destroyed 12 council ships?" The broadcast was coming from Earth, transmitted through quantum channels that the council had not yet learned to block. President Morrison's voice crackled through the static, speaking to anyone in the galaxy who would listen. "To all beings living under council rule, know that resistance is possible. Today, we proved that the council can bleed. Tomorrow, you can prove it too." Kala felt something she had never experienced before: hope. For her entire life, she had been told that the council was all-powerful, that resistance meant death, that slavery was better than extinction. But now, a species even more primitive than her own was fighting back and winning. On Earth, Dr. Helen Ross worked frantically in her laboratory at the University of California. The xenobiologist had been studying alien technology recovered from the crashed ships, trying to understand how their weapons and shields functioned. What she discovered changed everything. "The council ships are running on autopilot," Helen explained to General Carter over a secure video link. "Their technology is so advanced that most of their systems are completely automated. The crew barely understands how their own ships work. What does that mean for us? Carter asked. Helen held up a small device that looked like a smartphone, with extra circuits attached. It means a 17-year-old hacker just figured out how to give their ship's computer viruses. Danny Chun sat in his bedroom in San Francisco, surrounded by computer monitors and empty pizza boxes. For 3 days straight, he had been working on cracking the alien computer systems. The breakthrough came when he realized that the Council used the same basic programming language across their entire civilization. It's like they never heard of cybersecurity, Danny muttered to himself as his fingers flew across the keyboard. They trust their technology so much that they never considered someone might try to hack it. The virus Danny created was simple but effective. It would randomly shut down ship systems for 30 seconds at a time, not enough to destroy the vessels, but enough to make them sitting ducks for human weapons. He uploaded it to every Council ship in Earth's vicinity through their own communication networks. The effects were immediate. Alien ships began losing power, their weapons offline, their shields failing at the worst possible moments. Human fighters, outnumbered 100 to 1, suddenly found themselves fighting confused enemies who could not trust their own equipment. But the real change was happening on worlds throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrians were the first to act. Using tactics learned from intercepted human broadcasts, they began sabotaging the crystal mines where they had worked as slaves for generations. Kala led a group of miners in destroying the main processing plant on Zephyr Prime. They used the same type of improvised explosives that the humans had demonstrated in Australia, made from mining chemicals and spare parts. The explosion could be seen from orbit. For freedom, Kala shouted as the alien overseer facility crumbled into dust. It was the first time anyone on her world had spoken that word in 2 centuries. The rebellion spread like wildfire. On the water world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like Hydorians used their natural swimming abilities to attack Council underwater bases. They had been forced to harvest kelp farms for their masters, but now they turned their knowledge of the ocean depths into a weapon. Commander Splosh, a Hydorian who had been given that name by his Council overseers as a joke, led teams of swimmers to plant explosives on the hull of every Council ship that landed in their seas. The aliens never saw them coming until their vessels started sinking to the ocean floor. Even some of the Council's own species began to question their empire. On the ethereal homeworld, young members of the floating energy beings gathered, secret to discuss what they had seen in the human broadcasts. "Why do we help oppress other species?" asked one young ethereal named Light Whisper. "Our ancestors never intended for us to become conquerors." "Because the Council brings order to the galaxy," replied an elder. "Without us, there would be chaos." "But what if chaos is better than slavery?" Light Whisper asked. "What if the humans are right?" The question spread through ethereal society like ripples in a pond. For the first time in millennia, the Council's most trusted allies began to doubt their cause. Back on Earth, the war was changing humanity too. Former enemies worked together in ways that would have been impossible before the invasion. Russian engineer Anya Volkov shared her designs for energy shields with American scientists. Chinese General Liu Wei coordinated battle plans with his Japanese counterpart. Brazilian pilots flew alongside German mechanics to keep their improvised fighters. In the air dot in the underground bunkers of Switzerland, international leaders met to plan the next phase of the war. President Morrison sat at the same table as premiers and prime ministers who had been political enemies just weeks before. "The aliens made one mistake," Morrison said to the assembled leaders. "They thought we would fight each other instead of them. They divided us by nationality, by race, by religion. But when someone threatens all of humanity, we remember what we have in common." The French president nodded grimly. "My people are asking why we spent so much time arguing about borders when there are enemies from the stars." "Because we are human." replied the Nigerian representative. "We fight with each other because we are passionate about our beliefs. But when an outside force threatens our families, we become one people with one purpose." A captured council command ship had yielded more than just technology. Computer specialist Lisa Wong and her team had cracked the alien databases, revealing the true structure of the Galactic Council. What they found was shocking. "The Council is not what they pretend to be," Lisa reported to the assembled leaders. "They are not a unified government. They are more like a protection racket. Each species is forced to contribute ships and soldiers to maintain the empire, but most of them hate it as much as we do." The database revealed that the Council military was largely composed of conscripts from conquered worlds, soldiers who had been forced to fight for their oppressors, who had no choice but to serve or watch their families die. "We are not just fighting the Council," Morrison realized. "We are fighting an entire galaxy of slaves who have been forced to wear the uniform of their masters." This knowledge changed everything. Instead of simply broadcasting messages of defiance, Earth began transmitting detailed instructions on resistance tactics, escape routes, and how to build weapons from common materials. The humans were not just fighting for their own freedom anymore. They were teaching the galaxy how to be free. On a dozen worlds, alien soldiers began deserting their posts. Council officers woke up to find their troops gone, their weapons missing, their authority crumbling. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years was falling apart from within. And at the center of it all, on a small blue planet that had once seemed so insignificant, humans continued to fight with a determination that amazed even themselves. They had said no to the most powerful force in the galaxy, and somehow, impossibly, they were winning. The Council flagship, Eternal Glory, was burning. General Carter watched through her helmet display as human boarding teams fought their way through the alien corridors. The ship was supposed to be impregnable, protected by shields and armor that could withstand the blast of a star. But the humans had not tried to break through the defenses. They had simply ignored them. "Ramming speed was a good idea," Carter said into her radio as she fired her rifle at retreating Council guards. Behind her, demolitions expert Tony Rodriguez planted charges on every piece of equipment they passed. "Not trying to capture it, just wreck it," Tony replied, his Texas accent thick with excitement. "These aliens build everything too fancy. Too many computers, too many automatic systems. Makes it real easy to break." The boarding assault had been Danny Chun's idea. The teenage hacker had discovered that the Council ships were designed to fight other advanced civilizations that respected the rules of space warfare. They had shields to stop energy weapons, armor to resist missiles, and point defense systems to shoot down fighters. But none of their defenses were designed to stop a cargo ship filled with explosives from ramming straight into their hangar bay. Combat medic Sue Parker helped wounded Marines through the ship's twisted corridors. The artificial gravity was failing, making bodies and equipment float through the air in chaotic patterns. Emergency lights flashed red and blue, and alien warning sounds echoed through the metal halls. "How much longer until we reach the command center?" Sue asked. "2 more levels," Carter replied, checking her map display. "Then we plant the big bomb and get out of here." The plan was not complicated. The humans were going to turn the Council flagship into a massive missile aimed at their command station. It would not destroy the station completely, but it would send a message that no Council leader could ignore. Nowhere was safe from human determination. On worlds across the galaxy, the final battles of the rebellion were being fought. Kala led Zephyrian fighters in capturing the planetary governor's palace on Zephyr Prime. The blue-skinned miners had learned well from human tactical broadcasts, using hit-and-run attacks and improvised weapons to overwhelm their better-armed oppressors. "Today we take back our world," Kala announced as her fighters stormed the governor's throne room. Today, we remember what it means to be free. The Hydorian commander Splash coordinated attacks on Council shipyards orbiting Aquatica. His swimmers had been planting explosives for weeks, waiting for the signal from Earth. When it came, a dozen Council vessels exploded simultaneously, their hulls torn open by charges placed on their most vulnerable systems. Even on the Council homeworlds, rebellion was spreading. Young ethereals like Lightwhisper openly challenged their elders, demanding to know why their people had become oppressors instead of protectors. Our ancestors used their wisdom to guide other species toward enlightenment, Lightwhisper argued in the Great Assembly. When did we decide to rule them with fear instead? The older ethereals had no good answer. For 10,000 years, they had told themselves that the galaxy needed their guidance, that other species were too primitive to govern themselves. But the humans had proven that even the most primitive species could accomplish impossible things when they were free to try. Back on the Council flagship, General Carter's team reached the command center. The room was filled with holographic displays, showing battles across dozens of star systems. Red lights marked rebellions on 47 worlds. Yellow warnings indicated ship desertions and communication blackouts. The galaxy-spanning empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. Ambassador Zexthara stood alone in the center of the command room, his forearms working frantically at control panels that no longer responded to his commands. His crystalline wings were cracked and dulled with stress. "You cannot stop the Council," he said when he saw the humans enter. "We have ruled for 10,000 years. We brought order to the galaxy." "You brought slavery," Carter replied, raising her rifle. "And slavery always ends the same way, with the slaves deciding they have had enough." Tony Rodriguez placed the final explosive charge on the ship's main computer core. The device was powerful enough to turn the entire vessel into a guided missile. When it impacted the Council command station, the explosion would be visible from 50 light years away. 30 seconds until detonation, Tony announced. Time to go. The human boarding team ran for their escape pods as the ship's systems began to fail around them. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off corridors. Atmosphere leaked into space through holes torn in the hull. The great flagship that had once been the symbol of Council power was becoming a weapon aimed at the heart of their empire. As the escape pods launched, Carter watched the Council flagship accelerate toward the command station. The alien crews of both vessels tried desperately to change course, but their automated systems had been infected by Gani Chon's viruses. The computers obeyed only human commands now. The impact lit up space like a second sun. The Council command station, built to coordinate the conquest of entire star systems, crumpled like paper. Debris scattered across local space, carrying with it the dreams of galactic domination that had driven the Council for millennia. 3 days later, the surviving Council leaders requested a meeting with President Morrison. The conference was held on a neutral space station in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Representatives from 67 species attended, including many who had been Council slaves just weeks before. Zexthara, his wings now completely gray with defeat, spoke for the remnants of the Council leadership. "We offer surrender," he said simply. "Name your terms." Morrison looked around the conference room at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. Some were human, but most were alien species who had traveled vast distances to witness this moment. All of them had one thing in common. They were free. "We do not accept surrender," Morrison said, "because we were never fighting the Council. We were fighting the idea that some beings have the right to rule others without their consent." He stood up and walked to the large window that showed the Earth spinning slowly in the distance. "What we offer instead is membership in a new organization, a galactic federation based on voluntary cooperation and mutual respect. Every species will govern itself. Every world will choose its own path. And if anyone tries to build another empire like the Council, all of us will stand together to stop them." The room erupted in sounds that no human throat could make, clicks and whistles and harmonics that somehow all conveyed the same emotion. It was the sound of beings who had never dared to hope for freedom, finally believing that it was possible. Kala spoke for the Zephyrians. "What do you call this new federation?" Morrison smiled. "We call it what it is, a promise. A promise that never again will any species be forced to kneel to tyrants. A promise that the strong will protect the weak instead of exploiting them. A promise that every being in the galaxy has the right to determine their own destiny." He looked at each delegate in turn. "The age of empires is over. The age of freedom has begun." As the conference ended and representatives returned to their worlds, one question remained in every mind. Zexthara asked it aloud as he prepared to depart. "Why did you humans fight so hard against impossible odds? Why did you choose death over submission?" Morrison considered the question for a long moment. Then he gave the answer that would be remembered on every world for generations to come. "Because someone had to be first. Someone had to show the galaxy that freedom is worth any price, no matter how high. We did not fight to conquer or to rule. We fought so that no one would ever have to fight this battle again. The galaxy was free, and it would remain free because the humans had taught everyone the most important lesson of all, that the word no was the most powerful weapon in the universe."